set foot in the forest.
The shuttle Discovery is earthbound with touchdown just minutes away. A bus hijacking is over with a 300-mile chase through 2 states. And attorneys deliver opening statements in the Mike Tyson rape trial in Indianapolis. CNN Headline News, I'm Lynn Vaughn. We'll have those stories coming up, but first, a 14-member jury is hearing opening statements in the sanity trial of confessed killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Jurors will decide if Dahmer was legally insane when he killed and mutilated 15 men and boys. Testimony is expected to be detailed with tales of dismemberment and cannibalism. Dahmer's lawyer says his client should be confined to a mental hospital rather than prison so doctors can learn more about serial killers. Opening statements began today in the rape trial of former heavyweight boxing champ Mike Tyson. Jury selection was completed yesterday and the panel was sequestered. Tyson is accused of raping a Miss Black America contestant last July. He says she consented to have sex. If convicted, Tyson faces up to 63 years in prison. President Bush has a busy schedule ahead of him today, seeking support for his new economic revival package. This morning, he attended a national prayer breakfast in Washington. He flew to Philadelphia for a meeting with the state's business leaders. He is expected to address the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce in about 1 hour. The president leaves for New York later in the day. He is expected to meet with British Prime Minister John Major and other heads of state, gathering for tomorrow's UN Security Council summit. Russian President Boris Yeltsin will also attend tomorrow's meeting at the United Nations. He's in London today for talks with British Prime Minister John Major. The two signed a joint declaration on military and economic cooperation. Steve Hurst has more.
It's a coming out party of sorts for Boris Yeltsin, and it's sponsored by British Prime Minister John Major. On his way to the UN and Washington, Yeltsin stopped in London to see the British leader, to talk about nuclear weapons cuts, and to renew the old London-Moscow friendship axis started by former Prime Minister Thatcher and previous Kremlin boss Mikhail Gorbachev. There have been a lot of questions about Yeltsin's health recently, and he sought to put them to rest upon his arrival in London.
Как говорил Марк Твен, слухи о моей смерти не подтверждаются и несколько преждевременны.
I follow the remark by Mark Twain, the famous American author, who said that the rumors of my death are slightly exaggerated.
Несколько преувеличены.
But so far, the British haven't shown any sign of joining the outbreak of nuclear weapons cuts that is sweeping Moscow and Washington. Yeltsin, the economic aide, said would also be seeking Western understanding in the short run should Moscow be unable to make even interest payments on the gigantic debt run up by the former Soviet Union. Other former Soviet republics have stopped helping Russia pay off the debt. In New York, Yeltsin plans a session with the Japanese. Certain to come up is Russia's need for Japanese assistance and Japanese insistence that territorial disputes must be settled. The two nations still haven't signed a peace treaty after World War II, and Russia still controls the formerly Japanese Kuril Islands. But Soviet experts don't expect a straight land for aid trade.
I don't think that Japanese leaders and Prime Minister Miyazawa will directly link these two problems, islands and aid. Please give me a piece of your land, and in this case only I'll give you something to eat.
The biggest surprises could come as Yeltsin sits down for talks with Chinese leader Li Peng. The two nations share a long Asian border that has seen outbreaks of bloody violence in the past, even when both countries were communist. Now that there's not even that in common, an attempt at economic accommodation is apparently on the agenda for this short but wide-ranging Yeltsin tour. Steve Hurst, CNN, London.
U.S. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney says he doesn't expect a major announcement from President Bush's scheduled meeting with Yeltsin this weekend. The two are expected to discuss arms reduction issues at Camp David Saturday. In an interview on CNN, Cheney talked about the importance of continuing the Strategic Defense Initiative.
The suggestion now that we ought to cut even deeper or take it down faster somehow, I think would do enormous violence to the integrity of the force itself. It's an all-volunteer force. It's a force that is being reduced very rapidly. We've already taken 4 divisions off active status. The United States Army, for example. 2 of the divisions that undertook that campaign into southern Iraq in the Gulf had 22,000 men each of them. Those divisions are no more. Flags have been retired. So the notion that somehow we can more rapidly adjust now and take the force down even farther or faster, I think would do great violence to try to maintain the quality of the force itself. It is going to be significantly smaller. It'll be cheaper than it's been in the past for us to maintain it, but the U.S. still needs significant military capability.
Cheney reiterated the U.S. will continue to retain a military presence throughout Europe. Well, the man known as Ireland's political Houdini is unable to find or to make a final escape after dominating Irish politics for a decade. Prime Minister Charles Haughey announced today he will resign his post February 10th. His resignation follows a scandal involving his alleged phone tapping of 2 journalists in 1982. Haughey had built a reputation in recent years as a political survivor, shaking off several scandals. The Shuttle Discovery coming in now for a landing on runway 22 at Edwards Air Force Base in California. You're looking at live pictures of that. This concludes a mission that spanned 8 days, 3 million miles, and 129 orbits. The crew of 7 includes a Canadian neurobiologist and a German physicist. They performed around-the-clock experiments on the effects of weightlessness on plants, insects, crystals, and on each other. Discovery was originally set to return to Earth yesterday, but NASA extended the flight by 1 day. That allowed time for more experiments. Those experiments are being jointly watched by 225 scientists from 14 countries. One experiment failed when fruit flies were exposed to a sterilizing solution. Otherwise, the mission was virtually problem-free. A steering jet on the shuttle leaked propellant overnight, but NASA said all the other jets were working okay, and that would be sufficient for this landing. Let's take a look.
Landing gear is locked in place. Main gear touchdown. Gear touchdown as STS mission.
And another good one and safe one for NASA. This crew had some complaints about hectic scheduling on this mission. NASA gave them some time off yesterday to enjoy the view. This was NASA's 45th shuttle mission. Elsewhere today, a ride of terror is over for 8 passengers aboard a hijacked Greyhound bus. Police say a man with religious hallucinations hijacked the bus in Phoenix. Law enforcement officials set up rows of spikes in an effort to stop the bus. That didn't work. The 4-hour, 300-mile odyssey ended in Colton, California, where police cornered the bus in a residential area and shot and killed the hijacker. None of the 8 passengers was hurt. Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton is publicly apologizing for taped remarks he made about fellow Democrat Governor Mario Cuomo of New York. In a taped telephone conversation with Jennifer Flowers, a woman with whom Clinton, the woman who says she had an affair with Clinton for 12 years, he described the New York governor as a mean son of a bitch who acts like a mafioso. Cuomo says the remarks are more disturbing than other charges against Clinton.
As between the kind of infidelity, etc., that's being talked about, and an antipathetic view of other people, an unkind view of other people, a negativism that divides, etc., I'm not sure that the misplaced affection, which is infidelity, and I don't mean to demean it, but the idea of loving imprudently or unwisely, I'm not sure that that's as bad as encouraging people to hate one another.
The woman who taped the phone call and claims to have had a 12-year affair with Clinton has been fired from her state job. Flowers' boss says she was fired for missing 3 days from work without advance notice. The governor's office says Clinton had nothing to do with that. Former NBA star Magic Johnson says he will play in the All-Star game to prove he poses no health risk to other players. Last week, some Australian basketball players said they are worried about competing against Johnson in the Olympics. Australian officials later tried to smooth over relations by inviting Johnson to an all-star tournament. He has accepted, we are told. In the past years, colleges have diversified their curricula to include ethnic and women's studies programs. Now some campuses are also offering classes in gay studies. Don Knapp has a look.
Welcome. This course is about sexuality in American art.
Jonathan Katz teaches art history at City College of San Francisco with a different perspective.
And the distinction in how do we talk about homosexuality where we don't have bodies coupling? How do we understand homosexuality when nobody's being a homo? The field that I work in which some of the most famous, certainly the most recognized American artists were lesbian or gay. Their sexuality intrinsic to an understanding of the work, and yet their sexuality never discussed.
Katz wants to remedy that. He teaches in the nation's only college department devoted entirely to lesbian and gay studies.
Well, this is not so much about a college degree when you look at a gay and lesbian studies department. It's about a community here that is starved for information about where it's come from, about its roots, about other people who have succeeded as lesbians and gay men.
And in many ways, lesbians are pioneers. In many ways, we have no role models. We don't have those two old lesbian grandmothers rocking on the
Lindy
porch,
McKnight teaches to a packed house.
As a lesbian, and for gay men, education is still our primary vehicle for change, for changing society, for dealing with homophobia. And that's essential to us because that has to do with our survival.
But for some, the interest is much more basic.
I thought, well, if I'm trying to meet women, this is the perfect place. And it's also a chance to learn some things that no one's ever taught me. The only thing I've ever been taught about lesbians has been bad.
While there are no lesbian and gay studies degree programs, classes are popping up at universities like Duke, Yale, Columbia, Rutgers, and MIT. The City University of New York has a graduate lesbian and gay studies program.
I would only say that this whole movement is a very recent development, and if things continue to accelerate with gay lesbian studies as they have in just the last few years, I think we're going to see an efflorescence of such studies on college campuses.
Lesbians and gay men hope heterosexuals will also take interest in the classes. Don Knapp, CNN, San Francisco.
Coming up next in Dollars and Cents, the latest in business and market news from around the world.
See, that's page 5-6.
Okay, John, working on.
This is CNN Headline News. Larry Bird was born to be a champion. He was instilled with a competitive fire and passion that would never die.
One way or another, Bird kills you.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ lane.
Larry Joe Bird was destined for glory in the game he loved. Get bird watching at its best in this amazing video. Larry Bird, a basketball legend.